Now we are live. Welcome, welcome. I'm delighted to have so many of you. Hello, Bill. I have a special angle just
Hi,
for you,
Jane.
Bill. Jane, welcome, welcome.
Cynthia.
Cynthia, you see, the gang's all here. So welcome, everybody. I am Barbara Tien for Projectkin, and delighted to welcome all of you to our very first Substack Live for a very brand new series we're calling The Speaker's Corner. Now, this idea started as the brainchild of our very own Jennifer Jones, and we realized it was a tremendous opportunity to tell stories, actual stories, not about how to tell a story, and to focus on those as an opportunity to communicate with our audience. And Jennifer started telling me this story as an example of Caroline Chisholm in Australia and the white horse. Of course, she had me right there. So, Jennifer, tell me about the series and tell me about this white horse.
Yeah. Yes, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for coming along today. Well, the white horse, actually, it does evoke an image, doesn't it? But it's a very small part of Carolyn Chisholm's story. But and I did think I would love to find a photo of that, but of course it was Carolyn Chisholm's time in Australia was too early for photos. But there are quite a lot of drawings and things like that, and I thought I might find some artwork, which he did. There was a lot of artwork done around her, but no, there's no white horse, even though it did exist. So I have a guest here today. I've invited Anne Young to come along and help me to tell you what's coming up on Speaker's Corner next week. Anne is, most of you will probably know Anne from her newsletter, Anne's Family History, where she tells her really very well researched family stories, and she's been doing that for a long time. So I had no hesitation in inviting Anne to be my first guest on Speaker's Corner, as for those reasons, and also because she lives in the area where Carolyn Chisholm did some of her work. So I had a feeling she may probably know who she was and what she was all about, because Carolyn Chisholm was here early in the 19th century until about the mid-19th century, and she was very, very well known and had a huge impact on Australia. But as Anne and I have sort of realised as we've been talking, she's not so well known now. So Anne will tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. So we think it's very important that her story be told. And even though it's not a story of Anne's family history or my family history, it's a story of Australian history. So we're going to do that on next week, Speaker's Corner, the very first one, Thursday or Friday, depending where you are in the world. But Barbara will put information about that in the bottom. Also, there'll be a link to register if you haven't done that yet. So Barbara told you how Speaker's Corner came about, and we're going to have two guests on. It's going to be monthly, and we'll have two guests each time, and they will both come along and virtually jump on our virtual soapbox and tell the story from their family history. They'll both tell separate stories, of course, of about 20 minutes. But this week is our very first Speaker's Corner, so we're doing it a little bit differently. There will be two speakers, but one will be me, and I'll just have the one guest who will be Anne, and we're both going to tell the story about Caroline Chisholm from different perspectives. So don't forget register if you haven't registered. And just while I think of it, we have booked up until June next year. June's booked. We're taking bookings for July onwards. So it's been amazing how people have taken to it and been happy to, put their hand up and offer to speak. So if you have a family story that you would like to tell, don't hesitate. You won't be telling it until July next year, but get yourself into a slot because I can see that the rest of the year will book out very quickly. And we don't need to know now what your story is. We can work that out as we go on. We just need to get you booked in. So that's about it from me just for a minute. I'll just hand over to Anne to tell us about what's coming up next week in relation to Caroline Chisholm.
Okay, thanks. Good morning, everybody from the Australia, and we're at 7:00, so it's bright and early. So Jennifer asked me just over a month ago to talk with her about Caroline Chisholm, and I knew who Caroline Chisholm was. We learnt about her in school, and in 1966, when I was a child, the Australian currency changed from pounds to dollars. And in 1967, a $5 note was issued, and that was a new denomination for us because we didn't have £2.50 beforehand. And on the $5 note, it was purple. Caroline Chisholm was one of the featured people. And in fact, of the $1 note had the Queen and some Aboriginal artwork. And the other four notes, 2, 5, 10, and 20, all had notable Australians. And of the 8 notable Australians, so front and back, only one was a woman, and that was Caroline Chisholm. So that's she was a really significant Australian. She stayed on the $5 note until 1992. And then in 1992, we got polymer notes, so sort of plasticky notes. And they had dropped the $1 and $2 note, decided to put the Queen on the $5 note because the Queen had been on the dollar note and they wanted her to be on a note. And there was protests in Parliament from both sides of Parliament about replacing Caroline Chisholm. And John Howard was the leader of the opposition at the time, and Paul Keating was the Prime Minister. And they were united, which they very rarely were, in their opposition to the Reserve Bank's plans. However, the Reserve Bank went ahead. We got the Queen on the $5 note. Caroline Chisholm was dropped, and there were some other women on the other denominations, Dame Nellie Melba, Mary Ryby, Dame Edith Cowan, and so on. So there was more representation of women on the currency, but they basically changed who was on the currency. And since that time, I think that her being dropped from the currency has meant that she has less visibility and people don't know. So I tried my daughter, who had heard the name but thought she might be a poet. I tried the daughter of a friend of mine. She thought she might have been a prime minister, which, if anybody knows their Australian history, is really unlikely. And we have had one woman prime minister, but yes, no, not Caroline Chisholm. So what was she famous for? Well, she was an Englishwoman. She was born in England. She died in England. But she came to Australia in 1838, 50 years after the colony was set up. And she was known as the emigrant's friend. She really campaigned for better conditions for immigrants. And that's what we're going to be really talking about on Friday our time, Thursday most people's time. And the population grew enormously. So what I wanted to mention was immigration. In 1838, the population was 150,000 non-Indigenous people in Australia. And there was only one adult woman to every 3 men. So it was a really masculine society. And that meant that women would have a lot of problems. I mean, it's not an easy place and so on. So she was working on that aspect. In the 10 years afterwards, it doubled. The non-Indigenous population doubled. And then in the 10 years after that, we have gold being discovered, and Australia's population trebled again. So it was 6 times that of 1838 in the next 10 years. So it's an enormously changing population. And I had a look at my family's immigration, and I had some before 1838, a few in the first 50 years of the colony, a few more in the next decade, and then a lot came for the gold. So gold is a really dominant thing. And after 1858, I've only got one on my husband's side coming in 1888, and then my maternal grandparents and mother came after World War One. So for me, that period of the first years of the colony, but not the very first, and the gold rushes are really important. What about you, Jennifer? Your family's emigration?
Most of my family were here by 1850. A couple of my ancestors came in the 1850s gold rush. But I had very early, one of my two times great grandfather came as military to oversee the convicts. So he was here by, I think, 1810. He's my earliest. But yes, it was very, very changing, and the population was increasing, and you can just imagine the disorganisation that was probably happening around all these immigrants filing into the country. So she had a big job. Yes. Yeah. With all volunteer, by the way. She was just doing it herself. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. No. So she remarkable figure. We were talking earlier about who she might be comparable to in the United States, and we came up with the name of Susan B. Anthony as being somebody of similar dates. So Caroline was born 1808 and died in the 1870s. Susan B. Anthony, I think, is 1820 and campaigned for abolition, for women's rights, so women's suffrage movement and things like that, and also noted as a philanthropist. So I think, but the other one is Florence Nightingale. And when I say to people, have you heard of Caroline Chisholm? And the younger generation look blank and might have heard the name but don't know what. If I say, have you heard of Florence Nightingale? They'll say yes. So she is one that has persisted in memory. And Florence Nightingale regarded herself as a student of Caroline Chisholm. In her day, Caroline was really well known, and she was only the second woman to present to the House of Lords, two committees to the House of Lords. The first one was Elizabeth Fry. So there's all these notable women doing interesting things, and we need to not forget them, I think.
Yeah. That's such an extraordinary story to hear about how the power of having been on currency was so helped form that mental model for the generations of kids that otherwise it's just another historical character. We talked a little bit about how in the US, Susan B. Anthony almost made it to the currency and then not. And Sacagawea is another one. And there are many of these kinds of stories that we just haven't managed to put things on the currency, but then we haven't had a female queen. So that kind of affects things a bit, I suppose. It is so compelling to the perspective of how the general community views their own history.
Absolutely. And I think with these women, it's really interesting to see what they were doing at that time. They were so much ahead of their time. I mean, Caroline Chisholm had, Anne will correct me from my memory, I think it was 5 or 6 children. So she had a lot.
Eight children.
Because she had more. Yeah, 8 children.
Six who survived infancy.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. So she had, a lot of children to look after. And, she was away from home doing all this humanitarian work, and when women weren't out of the home doing anything, they were always at home looking after the children. So I would love to know the story around that too. But I haven't really been able to find anything much about that. But she did have a husband who was unwell. So at times.
And means. She was an heiress, is that right? I mean, she had means.
She had some means. She was middle class.
Yes.
So
really?
unlike Florence Nightingale, who was upper class, and had lots of means, Florence had some inheritance from her father, who was a farmer, but and she expended all of those. I mean, she ended up very poor as a
Yeah.
result. She wanted to be independent. Independence was something that was really important to her. She did not want to be seen as an agent of the government, and it was quite interesting how she managed to negotiate that. Um, but yes, now I was going to say something. Oh dear, gone from me.
Just to butt in, I came across an article in a newspaper. It was actually not even. I've been down a lot of rabbit holes, I will say, with this story, but
Yes.
I wasn't doing that this day. I was researching my own family, and I was reading an article about them. And the very next article, the heading jumped out at me: Carolyn Chisholm. So this was a letter she wrote. Her talking about a letter she wrote to a friend, and telling her how she was always interested in immigrants and people being looked after, and she used to play in the bath with broad beans with the boats and put little something, can't remember what she said, in these, on top of these broad beans to represent passengers, and she was taking them overseas to start new lives, and she had to sort them out because this one fought with that one, so they couldn't go on the same ship. And it was it was really funny, but really interesting to see that that was on her mind from when she was about 8 years old, and how it
Wow.
developed, which is quite incredible. Yeah, yeah.
She
Wow.
had a brother who emigrated to New York, and the family always stayed in contact. So, but yeah, no, he left England, went to New York when she was about 8 years old. So that would have featured
Yeah.
as part of
Oh,
her.
yes, that's where she's why it's been on her mind at such a young age,
Yeah.
because that's what I wondered about. Yeah, yeah,
So this
So,
idea of a little girl playing in her bathtub with boats and beans,
yes,
um, wow. So
yeah.
Dr. Mary Marshall, who happens to be out in New York, asks, is Caroline included or written into Australia's history? So she just joined late. So I think you want to talk a little bit more about that. Go
Yeah,
ahead, please.
yeah, yeah. I'll leave that to you, Anne. You can.
okay, so when I was a girl in the 1960s, when we had a subject called social studies. So we had classes that were divided much more. We did maths, we did social studies, we did English, and so on things. And in social studies, our concentration was on exemplary people. It was we did a lot of explorers, Vasco da Gama and Captain Cook, of course, and so on. And then we did people who, like Florence Nightingale, who would be held up. And one of those was Caroline Chisholm. So she was part of our curriculum. And
Mm,
yes, she's very much considered an Australian, even though, as I said, she was born elsewhere and died elsewhere. But she is so important to our history. So it's only the younger generation. I don't know what they're taught in schools these days. Um, but so I don't know if they have a different set of exemplary people that they use, or are they taught very differently? It's a question that I'm
yeah,
still working through. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
when Anne mentioned to me that she was doing a little mini poll amongst her family, I decided to do the same thing. And my son, who is 50, he knew the name, thought she might have been on money, didn't know what she did. Then my grandson, who's 18, he no idea, never heard of her, so I didn't even bother to ask the younger ones. But I did ask my sister-in-law, who a little bit younger than me, and yeah, she had a fairly good knowledge of her, pretty much the same as Anne. Oh, Anne knows more about her than me, but pretty much on a par with what I knew about her. Um, but so I think, like, we have to put this story out. Like, this was when I first came across her. I came across her because I was researching one of my ancestors in a little town not too far from me, and I had no idea that Anne Chisholm lived there for a while, and she held a lot of town meetings and was helping people that were poor, and he was really struggling to provide for his family. So I wondered, I wonder if he came across Anne Chisholm if you went to any of her meetings, or I'm sure he would have known about her. So that was what started me on this. So I'm really surprised how the story is fading. I
Yeah.
think, in 20 years' time, is anyone going to know about Caroline Chisholm? Once our
Right.
generation have gone, the ones
Right.
coming after us. I think that's sad. Yeah, yeah,
It is so extraordinary to show how, um, someone can fall into history because it is in the interest of those in power to have
yeah,
this story told, and then,
yes,
meh, not so much anymore,
yeah,
bye-bye.
yeah, yeah,
And, yet all of us as family historians who may be connected to this story through our own blood want to carry the stories on, and
yeah,
yet now, from a cultural perspective, you see across the community the value of those older stories that may not be appreciated politically today. I
yes,
suspect we're going to see a lot of those kinds of changes here in the
yes,
US as well. Not to make a political comment, but just in general, it's a substantial changes in how those kinds of things affect overall interview kids a few decades later.
yeah. And I think about the people that are very prominent today,
Yeah,
in politics or society and whatever. Is their story going to disappear in 100 years, or because of, the way we do
yeah.
things now, will it sort of hang around a bit longer? I sort of suspect it might disappear. Um, so we've got to get all those younger ones interested and
You know what, though?
tell the stories.
I have confidence. Here's why.
Yep.
Look at what we're doing. Look at
Yes.
what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're
Right.
using the same technology that might be used by a social media influencer to rep
Yeah.
some fruit juice, and instead we're talking about historical factors and people that
Yeah.
changed the world
Yeah.
by what they believed in. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
It is. And we're able to tell each other's stories across the seas now,
Yeah.
Like, I've learned so much about American history since I've been hanging out on Substack, and I'm sure you've probably learned more about history from our side of the world. So, I think it's great.
Absolutely. I think to me, that's one of the great things that's
Yeah,
happening here
yeah,
is this communication flow that happens from all of us who share a language in the United States, certainly. And it's surprising to me that even in Canada, you've
yes.
had the monarch on the money. In the US, that's like mind blowing. Um,
See, that's just normal
it's
for us.
But that is some of the fundamental differences, even
Yes,
as we share a language. And as you talk about a gold rush and the population shifts, I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area, which, though I had no ancestors here, was transformed by
it
that
was.
same kind of gold
Yeah,
rush,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And of course, the real people who made the real money were the ones that sold things to the gold
Yes,
miners.
exactly. Same here. Yeah,
Excellent.
so, yeah, yeah. So,
Well, we've had some wonderful comments in from all of you in the audience. Forgive me for not having a chance
yeah,
to cheer you on as you came in. I got so into the conversation here. Marion, thank you for your kind words. And we're excited looking ahead to Thursday, and this being the very first of our Speakers Corner series. And right here, you've given such a delightful introduction about how these stories are different from our straight up other Project Kin events and discussions because, oh, look, the Queen has joined. Welcome. Um, as we look at these many kinds of events where we talk about specifically how to go about something, or as in our last talk last week about microhistory and different
yeah,
ways to go about your storytelling, now we're just telling the stories.
yeah, yeah.
So it's going to be
That's
great
great.
fun.
Yes,
Thank you
yeah.
so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all the hearts that I see coming up. And I'm not very good at seeing the names as they come through. I'll have to improve on
It's hard.
but appreciate everyone being here. I really do. So, yeah. And looking forward to Speaker's Corner, seeing you all at Speaker's Corner next week. And don't forget, if you haven't registered, there'll be a link there to register. So
exactly. You can always find all the registrations at projectkin.org/events. All of our,
Sorry.
please.
Can
I'll
I
go
just
look
say
for the link.
thank you to Anne for coming along today and for even putting her hand up to join me in this because, as I said, it's not part of her family history and it's a time-consuming thing to, research a person who you really don't have that family interest in, but Anne very willingly said yes, she'd love to do it and has been great the whole way through. So
It's been fascinating. So many rabbit holes. There are so many interesting things about Caroline. No, it's really, and sometimes one needs to get out of one's own family history and think about what else was going on and the whole community. It has been, I haven't finished yet, a really interesting journey. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No,
well, that's exactly it. Thank you so much to both of you. This will indeed be great fun. I dropped the link in there, and all of our events are free. Come on down, and like this one, they will be recorded. But it's always so much fun to be able to ask the questions live. Again, both of you, 7 a.m. on a Monday morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone. Yep. And we'll see you
Bye-bye
next
now.
week. Bye.